Hi everyone! So today on Mold Pod Live, we're going to be chatting with Michael Rubino, and I'm just going to give a minute for everyone to get in the room. Thanks for joining. Happy you're here today. Happy Friday. All right, guys, I'm going to get you in the room now. Yes. All right. Did it work? Let's add. I'm going to invite you myself. There we go. Perfect. Hi, guys.
Hi there.
Hey,
All
Michael,
right.
TDD. What's
All
going
right.
on?
Thanks for joining us. So, I would love to intro you, Michael. I know you guys have known each other for a while, but Jonathan connected us more recently. So, I'm glad that we're all here together. So, guys, today we have the pleasure of being joined by Michael Rubino, who is the chairman of the board of Home Cleanse and Change the Air Foundation. And he's made a lot of appearances as a leading expert on mold remediation and air quality. And he also has his own podcast, Never Been Sicker. And he's pushing the conversation forward for creating better indoor air quality, which is what we're all about. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for all you do as well.
Absolutely. So like I said, you guys know each other pretty well, but since we just connected recently, I would love to hear a little bit about your story and how you got into the air quality mold remediation space.
Yeah, I'm a second generation restoration contractor. So my dad kind of did this since I'm about 5 years old. I'm 36 now, so it's been quite some time. Um, I started getting into it after Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast. It was right around that time that I moved back home after college, started, kind of working for my dad. To me, I never really thought I'd be doing this, what I'm doing today. I thought it was going to be more of a stepping stone. But as I started going into people's homes and realizing how sick they were from poor air quality because of that massive storm event, for me, it was the first time that I ever realized that air quality was important to human health. And when I was talking, I would sit and talk at the dinner table with my dad about this type of issue, and even he really didn't know that much about it because it really, back in the day there wasn't really a whole lot of before the IICRC came around. I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot of discussion around it. There wasn't really a whole lot of understanding about the different protocols that are required to really help people with this thoroughness that they really need. I mean, even today, I mean, the IICRC released a 2025, updated version, right? So it's an evolving science. Every year we're learning new things. So, 13 years ago, 14 years ago, when I first started seeing this, I was clueless, right? And as I started to actually open up my first wall, where I really saw how much mold was behind the wall because the front of the wall looked completely clean, white painted surface. Um, and I realized like what the problem was after the house was already remediated. It really, for me, started to become a passion of mine because uh, every house I went to was a different story, a different family dealing with different tragedies. From older folk to even kids. Walking into a police officer's house and seeing his son in a helmet because he was having seizure issues due to the poor air quality in the house. I mean, all these different stories that started to kind of morph in my mind of we've got a serious problem. I have a podcast called Never Been Sicker. I mean, the evolution of this today, I realize we've never been sicker than we are today. And the big question that comes in my mind is how much of that is attributed to what we're breathing inside our own homes, right? And so it's evolved for me over time since I first started, but now I couldn't imagine myself doing anything different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jonathan, did
hopefully this thing is on. I know I disconnected for a sec. I don't know what happened.
you're good. Yeah.
But I think it's so important how, and we've spoken about how this is not only have we never been sicker, but this is like a matter of national security. I mean, not just the police, but also like it's in the schools. The kids are getting sick. The teachers are getting sick. Where it's affecting our education, our safety.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen like in the military housing, especially, like our military is being exposed. The families of the military are being exposed. And yes, it's a global issue, but especially here in America, like we, if we want to be global power, we really have to be one step ahead. And sometimes it feels like we're one or two steps behind on a lot of this. So I'm so grateful for you, Mike, and the Detox Talk also for pushing this.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, from the health side, it's so true. Yeah.
yeah, military housing, it's a pretty big issue in so many different sectors of life, but military housing is something I'm involved in. I'm involved as an expert in two specific instances. They haven't been filed yet, but I'm working with Justwell Law as an expert evaluating, two specific cases that, to me, I mean, you've already seen probably some videos of me being in these facilities and looking up and looking around and making comments. I mean, to me, um, not only does our military housing, it's a massive crisis. It definitely is a national security issue. But you think about people that have literally selflessly put their lives on the line for all of us. And I mean, the living conditions in some of these facilities are worse than third world countries. I mean, I'm just going to go out and make that bold statement. I mean, these are not great conditions to be in for anyone, let alone families that are sacrificing their lives on the line for the rest of us to have our freedom. And so, I think we really need to look at this perspective twofold. One, we're talking about families here. I mean, I don't care what political belief you have, what religion you have, we're all people. And as people, we have to support one another. And then you have the other side of it being a massive national security issue, right? Because, I mean, I can't talk specifics, but there's an email that I read in the course of this one litigation case I was part of. And essentially the email was a sergeant who was overseas. Some of the email was redacted for national security purposes, but the body of the email was a cry for help. I need help. My family's back home suffering, and I'm here supposed to be mission ready, and I can't be mission ready because I'm worried about my family. And so these are the types of real stories of how this impacts real people in our military and how it's affecting people in high positions in our military. So I think it's a discussion Congress has had before. It's not like this is a new problem, but I'm watching everybody flail. And what's the solution to this? The solution to this is let's clean up these damn houses.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make it any more clear than that. And it's, I think, to me, the frustration is, they know these problems exist. I've seen the emails, but nobody's taking action to properly investigate and to properly fix these houses. And that's what it is. It's like we have to take action. We have to make this a priority. And the other thing about this from a medical standpoint, I'm sure you've seen, is like, you've got this rift in the medical community of how big of an issue is this. It's a freaking big issue.
Yeah.
Until we're willing to acknowledge that, you know what I'm saying? We're not going to actually put money to the research that's necessary to prove the widespread problem that this actually is. And so, it's so frustrating because the writing's on the wall, right?
Yeah.
And all we need we just need some people to help take the writing on the wall and make it fact. And if you're part of the naysayers that don't believe air quality is important for whatever reason you possibly could have, then prove us wrong.
Yep.
Right?
Challenge.
You can't say that there's no evidence to support this, right? Because that's the argument, which, by the way, there's plenty of evidence to support this. So you can't make that argument
unfounded
and say that
Exactly.
The lack of evidence is my case. That's not a case,
No,
right?
not
And
at all.
so, I think it's if we really want to disagree, then let's disagree in the right manner. Let's actually appropriate the resources needed to actually create the studies and research required to make that disagreement a reality. I'm happy to be wrong. I don't mind being
Yeah,
wrong. I'm happy to be
it would
wrong.
be great if it weren't such a big issue, but it is.
The problem is that if I'm right, which it's not just me speaking. I mean, we wouldn't all be on this podcast if we all didn't agree, right?
Right.
If we're all right here, then we're talking about something that's affecting billions of people and their health. We're talking about, a massive part of the global population, not just a small percentage, right? And so
True.
I tell people all the time, actually, I think health is very simple. We need to breathe clean air. We need to drink clean water. We need to eat clean food, right?
Yep.
Everything stems off of that foundation. And we're not even addressing one of the most important human foundation blocks here. And it
Absolutely.
drives me nuts because how are we ever going to get the progress we need to get the better health that we need across this amazing world that we all live in if we're not acknowledging one of the biggest problems? And that's why, I mean, you could probably sense the frustration and passion because this is what I deal with on a daily basis. I mean, if you read my emails every day, it's an insane amount of people asking for help, right?
Yep.
What are we going to do to help people on a big scale? I
Yep.
mean, that's partly why I wanted to help bring Change the Air Foundation into existence. If you don't know Kendra or Brandon, I mean the other two co-founders are amazing human beings, and the foundation would be nothing without them, right? And so I want to acknowledge just everybody who's supportive of the foundation and trying to help because there's a lot of work that we need to do to kind of to shift this.
That's so true. Jonathan, do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to add. I like how your podcast is called "Never Been Sicker" because I think it's true in a sense that some of the cases that I see, and I know the Detox Doc sees, and we help people together. It's like really the worst of the worst. Like, not only are you sick, but it's like not possible to be sicker. Like, your whole body is literally shutting down. The brain. I mean, we've seen people who are really in the worst, not only physically but mentally. Like, there's no more motivation, there's no more drive, they're just ready to give up because people don't realize that mold can affect your brain and your body. And it doesn't have to be the quote unquote toxic black mold that everyone talks about. There's plenty of kinds of toxic molds that are white or brown or green, and even if it's not toxic, is it really good, or is they're all bad, they're all producing these gases and these toxins or these mold spores, fungal fragments, and it really shuts people down and you get hallucinations. And that comes back to like military and police. Like, do we really want our military to be hallucinating things? Or it comes to a very scary level that a lot of people don't recognize. But is there mold in our White House? Is there mold in our Congress building? Is there mold in the Supreme Court? I think we all know the answer to that, unfortunately. Um, I'm sure that the mold testers they have will say otherwise, but I think there's got to be, more, like you said, change. And that's why I've pursued my legal career in environmental law. And someone like Christina with Justwell, she's like an inspiration to me, someone who's going to hold the government accountable, or who's going to hold the CDC, the EPA. Like, it's extremely important.
Yeah, totally true. And with the military, from the medical side, people think, oh, military, you have, great insurance, like everything is covered. And then people will trust them that the medical system will, take care of them in the right way. And I've interacted with a lot of docs from the traditional med world this week more than usual. And I just always like to, see what they think about mold and talk about what I do. And I mean, they're all totally clueless, right? So that's why we're all on here spreading awareness. And, it's, change takes numbers, takes power. So I think that all of our collaboration definitely helps. So
Totally.
yeah, I mean, yeah, but never been sicker. Yeah, I love that because it's poignant because I was talking with someone the other day about how, oh, is it 1 in 30 something have autism now, or 1 in 20 something now? It's just, I mean, almost, it's like almost
It
all
used to
kids
be what, one
eventually are
in
going to have
ten
autism.
thousand?
Right. Mm-hmm. It's like, how could the environment not be related to that?
I mean,
So,
if you look at pretty much, I don't know, pick a disease, pick a condition, like the numbers are going up
yep.
across the boards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is not a good thing, right? And here's why I think air quality plays such a big role into this. First off, with the advancements in medicine and technology, I mean, it's 2025, right? I mean, I would argue that the science has advanced tremendously. Technology has advanced tremendously. I mean, think about it. We have medicines today that never existed, right? We have technology today that never existed. I mean, look what AI is doing, right? I mean, we are exponentially getting smarter, faster, more efficient, but yet we're getting sicker. Make that make sense to me. It only makes sense if either two things. One, we're completely missing the boat, which how many medical doctors are asking people when people come to their facility, well, how's the air quality at home? Yeah, any water damage at home. So if we're not asking that question, right, then we're missing one of the biggest pieces, which is what you're breathing. And we all know that what you're breathing, right, air transmission is one of the greatest routes of exposure for so many different things. Pick an illness, and it's probably going to be the greatest route of exposure. And so when we think about it from that perspective, how the heck are we not asking that question? The number one question that probably should be asked, right? We don't ask it. Okay, so that's why I think that, truthfully, it's one of the biggest missing links here. And it's a biggest missing link because we all take 20,000 breaths per day. We all consume enough air to fill up a normal sized swimming pool every single day. I mean, that's a lot of air. What's in that air? I mean, do any research. I look up any research paper talking about air transmission or particle pollution and how much particles human being inhales. Hundreds of millions of particles every day, right? So we're not going to look at what those particles are and how they might be impacting the human body and where they might be coming from. That's just stupidity at its root level right there. I mean, so I think, we're not looking in that direction. It's very abundantly clear because you can ask any. As a matter of fact, it was at a conference, the Integrative Health Symposium 2 weeks ago. I saw a doctor walk by with the Cleveland Clinic badge, right? I was like, I'm going to stop her. Hey, you want to come talk to me about mold? She looked back and laughed at me and just kept walking. No interest, right? So obviously she had this preconceived notion that like, I don't think that's a thing, right?
Right.
And look, I don't care if you're a doctor or not, we're human beings at the end of the day. Think about any preconceived notions you might have had in life and somebody said something to you and you're like, probably don't want to waste my time talking about this, right? Yeah. So that's where we are. The reality of it is that's where we are. We have a lot of doctors that have preconceived notions that, air quality is not a big deal. Mold's not a big deal. So that's a barrier that we have to overcome as a society, right? What's it going to take? A lot of science. And it's going to take, like, think about like as a human being psychologically, when you've had some like false idea. And then all of a sudden, like, think about what it took you to overcome that false idea. It was like a friend told you, like your relative told you, like 10 people had to tell you the same thing. And you were like, the first time you're like, can't believe how wrong that idiot is, right?
Yeah.
And then like, by the third, fourth, fifth person, you're starting to like question reality itself. You're like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's me. Everybody else is saying the same thing. Then you start doing the research, right? But then you're like, think about that confirmation bias. You're like, now you start searching the other side. Well, how could I be right? Because human beings, naturally, we want to be right? So you're like, how could I be right? And you start looking for confirmation bias that supports your argument, right? And then it's at some point you literally just like, you're like, all right, I give up. I was wrong. But like, think about all the stages. If we could really be honest with one another right now, right? That you have to go through to get to that level. And so, I think what's it going to take? It's going to take a lot of research, a lot of science, and a lot of confirmation. And we're going to have to, show people 10 different ways until they finally grasp, okay, the air I breathe matters to my health. And I know it's frustrating, but that's where we are, And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, research is really, really important. Unfortunately, there has not been a lot of money appropriated to the study of this stuff. COVID's changed that a little bit. There's more appropriations, but it's still not enough. And there's not a lot of there's not a lot of interest in this because usually studies are done with some sort of solution on the back end of that. And so if we're not acknowledging the problem, we're not actively developing the solution. I think that's part of the catch-22 we're stuck in.
Right, and also that their supplements are often used to treat it, and there's not, money being put in from, well, obviously it's about money, right?
There's
But
no
money
pharmaceutical
being put
mold
in
pill, right?
from the mold pill that doesn't exist. Yeah. So, and I just was smiling when you talked about the confirmation bias and all of that changing of your viewpoint, because as a doctor, we tend to trust that our medical education was complete and thorough and included everything that we would need to know to treat patients. And I did primary care. And so that definitely came into play for me when I heard about mold. And it took me a while I was a scientific skeptic, as I should have been. And it took me quite some time to come around with it. But I mean, now I just preach it, 24/7. But it took some time for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it
Makes sense.
yeah.
I was going to say it kind of reminds me of my mold assessor license training, where I'll be the first one to say this license is necessary, but it doesn't mean you know what you're doing. I mean, when I looked at this training, it was like mold is bad, true or false. Like it was like stuff like that that was like your training is never really complete and thorough until you get that real world experience. Even like when I went to law school, like I didn't come out ready to practice law. They teach you like the basic, the black and white stuff, but in real life, like you said, we're dealing with people, cases, and you have to have experience like to help someone heal or to remediate or assess or whatever it is. You have to really see it and know it. And I think that's what it takes to change people's beliefs is they got to see it a lot of the time, which or hear it, which is why I think our content and our podcasts are so important. And our platforms, like they can't censor like certain things. I'm even still afraid to say like the big A or the big C, like these things that people will just be upset about, and it's easy to get canceled or silenced. But we do have to ask the important, if there's a brain problem, well, is the brain inflamed? If there's a lung problem, well, or anything, what are we breathing in? If there's the big C, well, what's causing the body to not be able to fight? And then people are like, oh, I got to be healthy, so let me go buy the whole wheat bread now. Well,
Well,
it turns out your whole wheat bread is filled with mold and mycotoxins too. So what even is healthy? Like I think we're moving in a bad direction in general. And I'm
Jonathan, you
glad you.
should know that the Cancer Research UK, I think it was 2 years ago now, they came out with, they dropped a bomb on everybody and said, hey, actually, the second leading cause of lung cancer outside of smoking is air pollution, right? And so I think that started to open the door. Hey, guys, we need to take more of a look at air pollution as it relates to cancer. I mean, the second leading cause of cancer. I mean, that's something. That's something to look into, But everything takes time. I mean,
Oh.
that I'm sure that study is now going to open the door for more appropriations and for more research on that topic. But it's a very it's the slow boat here, and that's kind of where we're at. I mean, I'm more excited today than I was 13 years ago because I've seen so much change, which is obviously the positive thing here. But we're still so far away from where we need to be, and there are people that stand in the way of that progress, and I run into them every day. You know, somebody sends me a podcast of people talking about, you know, mold in the attic and remediating the attics. Ridiculous, because mold will just come right back into the attic. And it's like, you know, it's like, wow, how do I even address this? Right. It's like there's so much stupidity in that statement, right? That, you know, it's bewilderment. How do I help overcome all of these people being misled by professionals that have been in the industry for 20, 30 years? I mean, these two people that I'm talking about, they were in the industry probably 20, 30 years, maybe more. I don't know. You have all these other issues with in these legal cases, right? What do I see? I see that we get an inspector to come in and do a thorough analysis, confirm that there's mold everywhere. Not to mention, you literally have like ceilings sagging and caving in, and photographic evidence of water damage, right? And then you have the companies that they hire to go in and take an air sample in the center of the place and say everything's fine. And you're just like, but how is that possible that everything is fine? It's the exact opposite, this other inspection, right? And so, you know, that's where we're at. We have these so-called experts that are not doing their job the way that they should be. And that result allows this progress to stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I had a decent call with an attorney probably a few months ago now, and the attorney was somebody that I view on the other side of the fence. Okay, and the call, you know, was like, look, we want to do the right thing here, but we need some sort of threshold to be judged against, and like I understand that because, you know, what do attorneys want? They want black and white, right? It's one way or the other. There's no interpretation. The problem is that a house or a building requires interpretation. There's no black and white, right? And so if you take any sort of course on, you know, mold or air quality or bioaerosols or, you know, healthy home or whatever, any sort of course on the topic, they're going to tell you that there's a mountain of information that you're supposed to kind of go through. And this mountain of information is something like, is there moisture? How are the people feeling, right? Do we have issues with the HVAC? Is the humidity too high? How's the ventilation, right? Did you use thermal imaging, right? It's not just taking air samples. It's not just collecting dust, but it's using all of the tools that you have to assess the building. And so therefore, there's going to be what's called variables. Now, you might not know this, but about 50,000 variables go into building a house, right? An incredible amount of variables. Therefore, there is no possibility for this to be such a black and white issue. It requires a proper analysis and, really being honest about the situation. Now, when we look at it from that perspective, when you have people complaining about their health, and first off, the first thing that anybody should do is take that complaint at face value, right? Some of these old school guys, they just automatically think the person's being dramatic. And that's one of the biggest things that I see that people have to overcome. Like, if you've been doing this for a long time, you kind of get stuck in your ways a bit. Well, progress requires that we actually take things at face value, and then let's figure it out. If the person's being dramatic, you're going to know if you actually do a full assessment, as if the person's not being dramatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what you're going to find 99.999% of the time? The person's not being dramatic. There's a reason. They're right. I could tell you stories of people that had called me up and said, Michael, I'm telling you, you did a great job, but every time I'm in the living room, I just get this thing. And okay, let's get somebody out to retest the living room. Lo and behold, there was a problem in the freaking living room that they didn't find on the first inspection, right? These things happen. Now, I could have said, no, I'm the best there is, right? I'm the best there is. This is in your head. I didn't do that. I said, let's test the living room. Why? Because if you feel great everywhere, especially after the place is remediated, but you don't feel good in the living room, we have to take that at face value. That's what a professional does. And so, I think it's one of these situations where there's, in order to get the progress that we need on this very important issue, we're going to need people to, kind of get on board with progress and not be so resistant to change. And I get it. Change is scary, right? But change is also evolution. And what do you know about human beings? We've been evolving, right? Since we've graced our presence on this planet. We need to keep doing so. And right now, we have been evolving in the wrong direction, because if you believe the idea that we have never been sicker than we are today, which I hope if you're listening to this, you do, not because I want it to be so, but because the statistics don't look good. And it's important that we confront that so that we can evolve properly and, get out of our own way, if you will.
Yes, so true. So people who are listening to this, so thankfully have heard about mold or are hearing about mold. And so say, just to kind of review some of what you already said, but if somebody says, okay, I do have unexplained medical symptoms and I want to check my place for mold. I know you guys, we have two experts here on the home side today. So, making sure to work with a professional is important, but first steps that they should take from the home side when they feel like, okay, maybe my environment is making me sick, what should they do?
Yeah, well, I definitely think, obviously as mold assessor, I'm going to say this, but I think before any good remediation, there has to be a third party assessment. And as we all know, there's really a, a separation from the assessor and the remediator, because you want there to be a third party, a non-biased mold assessment report to create the protocol for the remediator, which helps everyone, because then the remediator, has a protocol, the client gets peace of mind. But we've even been talking now a lot with like mold dog companies, where that's another great tool for a mold assessment, which it's by no means is any of this perfect, but the more tools you use, mold assessment, mold dog, even maybe Michael, you can talk some about the dust testing. But it's really like there's no one perfect method, but the more imperfect methods you combine with really good interpretation, I think that goes a long way, especially if you're coming into litigation. Like, you don't want to hire Joe, the air quality guy. You want to hire the mold assessor or the Michael Rubino with Home Cleanse. Like, get the Detox doc. Get the real deal in there, because sometimes there is a fight coming and you have to be prepared with the right team.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, I created a company called Home Cleanse. Home Cleanse will not work with you as a homeowner unless you have a actual investigative report. And the reason for that is, we're not a company that just comes out and swings a hammer. We are precise. We want to precisely improve the quality of air that you're breathing, and there's a technology to do that. And the technology requires actually having evidence of what the problems are, where they are, how bad they are. I even like to know what types of mold we're dealing with. The reason that I helped create the dust test as well, just to kind of close that loop there, is a little bit of a twofold thing. One, air testing is a terrible screening tool. It's a great tool to validate the presence of mold in a specific targeted area, for sure. 100% have to use it. It's always used. I want to make that very clear. But to take an air sample to measure mold across the existence of an entire house, absolutely bloody terrible at that. And sadly, a lot of people use that technology that way, and it's just incorrect use of the technology. And so we wanted to create the dust test to let people know this is the ideal first step in terms of, if you want to answer that question, do I have mold and what kind of mold do I have? It's a great tool. It's not going to tell you where it is. Um, you know, so it's really more of a screening tool. But I like that as a first step, and I'll tell you why. Because we have such a rocky um, issue with getting a good inspection. I think knowing what molds you're dealing with ahead of time and being able to prepare that and give that to the inspector and say, hey, look, this is what's elevated in my house. This is what I'm looking for, some guidance and help for you to figure out. The old guard would say like, oh, you don't need that because we just got to figure out where the water was, right? Or where the water is. But, what if you go on a dry day, right? You need to be able to know how to look for a building that gets wet, even when it's dry, right? And so if it's dry for a week, unfortunately, you're not going to have that same type of feedback as you normally would after a nice big rainstorm, right? And so having that information and then knowing where to test and then being able to match those things up, I think is going to be very valuable, right? Because at the end of the day, if our goal is to reduce what people are being exposed to, shouldn't we know what they're being exposed to ahead of time and then make sure that what they're being exposed to, we know where the source is, right? And so you have all these people that are like trying to just find the areas that are still wet. But what about areas that leaked, 10 years ago? I mean, Jonathan, I don't know if you've seen this. I know I've seen this. I've seen issues that, were leaks 10 years ago that have since been repaired, but the colony of mold's still there. And if the colony of mold is still there and it's still producing spores, maybe it's not as much as if the area was still wet, but if it's still producing spores and or toxins, then it's still impacting the quality of air that the person's breathing. And how do you prove that? Well, if I can pick it up in an air sample, right, then obviously it's still getting into the air, isn't it? Right. And so I think there's a lot of these like older ideologies that I think have stood in the way of progress, that it'd be really nice to just like get over that disagreement here. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out what are the problems that are inside the home that might be impacting the air quality, that might be triggering these symptoms. And that's how we're trying to close the loop on this. And that's the only reason we're trying to close the loop on this. And so, yeah, I mean, if we use all that technology, figure out where all the problems are, and then remediate it properly, we're going to get good outcomes. And I think that's as simple as that.
Yeah, and then I get a lot of questions about now my home has been remediated, what do we need to do after? So post remediation testing, small particle cleaning, like what do we need to do after?
So it should all be post tested to verify the remediation is successful, right? I think that's step one. You could be the best in the world. You're dealing with something microscopic you can't see, right? You can be the best in the world. I think that even the best in the world sometimes has to go back and open up a little more, clean a little more thoroughly, et cetera, et cetera. So I think post testing is important because you want to validate that it's all gone. I think outside of the remediation, right? So that there's two things of remediation that people need to understand. You have the source removal. That's what most companies do. Most companies come in and do source removal. Not everybody does it well, but that's typically what most remediation companies are attempting to do when they come in and remediate a house. Now, the second aspect is going to be more that fine particle cleaning, the removal of, let's call it condition 2, or if you want, we can call it fine particle cleaning, or just we want to remove the byproducts of the colonies that have been growing inside your place. And those byproducts include spores and fragments and mycotoxins, and honestly, it's probably gonna have some bacterial spores. You're probably gonna have some bacteria, maybe some endotoxins. Like it's gonna be a mess, because when you have water come into the building, there's a lot of different byproducts that come out of that, not just mold, right? And so you want to look at the HVAC system. A lot of these particles are so small, they bypass your filter in your HVAC, meaning that coil that's vulnerable because it always condensates is a very vulnerable part that could get contaminated throughout this process. Now, you got to actually clean the coil properly. Now, I'll tell you from a consultative perspective, I consult with a lot of people, and the number one question I ask, did you clean your HVAC after remediation? I get a lot of no's. I didn't know. Nobody said anything. Okay. That's pretty simple. Let's make sure that's done. But then I get a lot of yeses, right, too. And so I'm like, good. Well, how did they clean it? Oh, yeah, they I watched them. They opened it up. They sprayed it down real good. Oh, it was crazy how much stuff came out. Okay, good. You realize a coil has two sides, right? You got the other side in the back. How do they clean that? And people are mind blown. They're like, oh, there's another side? So I pull up a picture of a coil, I show it to them. Oh, yeah, no, they didn't. Yeah, no, they didn't get that side. Well, of course they didn't get that side, because the only way to get that side is to take the coil out, which means you have to drain the system down if it's freon, right? Pump the system down, discharge the system, take the coil out, right? And thoroughly clean the coil. Ask me how many people are doing that. I'm going to tell you probably 90% are not doing that, right? If not more than 90%. And so that's been another big issue. Now, then you start looking at cost versus worth. Well, I could buy a coil at a local HVAC supply house, sometimes $500, sometimes $1,000, $1,500, right? I mean, to take the coil out and clean it, I mean, sometimes costs more than just buying a new coil, right? And so I tend to lean in the direction of just buy a new coil, because if you clean it and they don't clean it well enough, now you're in this predicament where it's like, I've got to clean it again and go through that whole process again, and who's paying for that? And so it's like, sometimes it's just, what's the better value here, right? And now you would have, people listening to me saying this, you're going to have somebody say, that's ridiculous, replacing the coils. That's absolutely insane. It's just going to get contaminated again. You're right. It will, if you don't put a good filter on it and if you don't maintain it properly. It absolutely will. But it's not ridiculous if the starting point is really bad, right? Jonathan, you know what an EPA 36 test is, or you could like actually swab and do like a PCR test on the coil, right?
Of course,
I mean, if
yeah.
you start seeing millions of particles there on a square inch of a swab here, I mean, you can pretty much deduce from there's going to be a lot of mold in that coil. The coil is going to be two sides, again, like an A, like this picture, the shape of an A, side here, side here. It's about 1 to 1.5 inches thick on both sides. You got so little space in between each fin, you could barely fit a toothpick in between it. So if it's pretty bad, yeah, I'm going to recommend 9 times out of 10, hey, just replace that thing. And you know what? Maybe that's overkill. Maybe that's too thorough. But if you're asking me to make a decision based upon someone else's health, I'm sorry, but I'm going to pick what I think is the best decision for them every single time. And I don't care what's good for the industry, because this isn't about the industry. This is about people and their livelihood. And when you hear the stories like that I hear on a daily basis, I mean, I just want people to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and with the HVAC, it's like even the duct work too, right? I mean, we talk about that a lot, Jonathan. So it just underscores you have to work with the right people and do the right thing for your home and your health.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
especially.
think you have to make a decision, right? Like all of this, decisions cost money in this realm. You're gonna have to make decisions, and you're gonna have to make the right decision. And sometimes those decisions are gonna be hard, but it's important that, like I always start with, here's the most thorough thing you can do, and I start to go down from there. Here are some other options, right? But there's pros and cons to everything, and you need to understand that. I can't make the decision for you and your family, but I can give you as much information as I possibly can, so that you can make what you think is the best decision for you and your family. And I'll tell you what I would do, right? I would replace the coil. That's what I would do, especially if it was that bad. And so, I think it's one of those situations where I just want people to make the best decisions they can for themselves. It's not a perfect science. There's no perfect answer. There's 50,000 variables in a home. Every home is unique. Every family is unique. What they're going through is unique. Their financial situation is unique. And somehow I'm supposed to help every single person that comes across my desk. And it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it starts with being truthful to who you are, what you believe in, and giving people the right information. And so, am I right about everything? Probably not. That's okay. But I've seen enough things work, and I've seen how they work. Every single year, I get to help probably somewhere around 350 people, like physically with our guys in their home. So it's not an insignificant subset of people. And so I've seen enough things go right. I've seen enough things go wrong over the last 13 years that I've been doing this. And my goal is to help people just have the right information so they can make the right decisions. But these are tough decisions. And to sit here and say that it's all this or all that, I think is incorrect, because I think everything is unique, unfortunately.
Yeah, completely agree. And, we talk about the ductwork, I think it's a huge issue, especially in Florida, where I can't even assess every inch of the ductwork, or most duct cleanings are not going to clean every inch of the ductwork. But some of the nastiest, worst, gross mold you'll ever see is when you take out that AC and you look straight into the opening of the plenum. You will see horrible stuff in there. And there's ways to do it. There's ways to clean it. There's ways to assess it. You need an AC guy, but replacing it is always, like Mike said, the best option. And we can go down from there, but what's the safest option? And you talk about overkill. I say it's okay to do overkill when we're making healthy decisions. Like when it comes to HEPA air purifiers, I say go ahead and do overkill. Like it's not going to harm you. There is a financial cost, but replacing your duct work, other than the money, it's not going to harm you. 99.9% of the time, it's going to help you. Or even replacing those coils, it is all generally helpful. And when you do these overkill things to get clean air, clean surfaces, like you'll be surprised when you walk into your home and it's like a healing environment. Like I think clean air is medicine. Clean surfaces are medicine. Sunshine and fresh air is medicine, and we're not even getting that. Like before any prescriptions, I know the detox doc, Dr. Dye, you would never jump straight to a prescription when you could first start with clean air, clean diet.
Yep.
So I say do overkill. Don't do overkill mold testing. Don't go buy 1,000 petri dishes and drive yourself nuts, but get five, if you can, get 5 air purifiers, or get that box fan and attach that filter to the back. Make your own filter. But like Mike very importantly said, HVAC is like one of the number one issues. Take the burden off of your AC. Make sure it has a good filter in it. Make sure you have a HEPA purifier next to it. Make sure you have a dehumidifier next to your AC so that the coils are even less moist. A lot of the AC guys, they'll say, well, every unit looks like this. Let's do something about it. Instead of just selling people, they don't want you to know that a coil is only $500. That they're going to probably charge you 3, 4, 5 grand to put that and a UV light bulb, which a UV light is like what, a couple $100 also. And these things aren't helping people as much as like do what you can do. Clean your air, dry your air, clean your surfaces with a HEPA vacuum. So really great points.
Yeah. So you guys are talking about getting the right information, spreading the right information. So Michael, I know you're Change the Air Foundation, because I talked with Brandon too. So he's talking about how there's a lot of resources on that website, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you feel like you might be in mold and you are overwhelmed by the information, you're not sure where to start, Kendra put together the Start Here section. It's on the website. It's fantastic. It's amazing. And it literally takes you step by step, like how to find a good inspector, how to find a good remediator, all the different, like understanding the testing technologies, the limitations on those technologies. You want to pre-arm yourself with some information so that when you're vetting who to bring into your house, right, you know who the good people are and who might be more of a waste of money. And I think that's one of the big benefits, because a lot of people, they spend money, they spin their wheels. Happens all the time. They get bad advice, they hold on to that advice, they do things out of order. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So the more you can arm yourself, the better, the more empowered you're going to be with taking the right steps and putting together the right team. And I think that's what really comes down to. I mean, there are obviously other good remediators out there, right? I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the only one. There's some good inspectors out there, right? And so I think but you need to know how to find them. And I think that's what it really comes down to. And if you don't know how to find them, you're going to make some mistakes, unfortunately. And fixing your house is not an area you want to make mistakes on, because making those mistakes can be costly. So I think, if you want to go to the foundation website and click that start here, I think it would be very valuable for you to get some basic information.
Awesome. And I love that you said do things in the right order because that comes up so many times for me with detox protocols. So I just want to underscore that as well because a lot of things are done in the wrong order by a lot of mold practitioners or consultants with people's health. So if you're looking for which order to detox in, make sure you head to my page to check that out. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting how there's kind of a parallel between the home and the body. And like, you probably want to start with assessment, then do detox or remediation, and then maybe do another assessment. Make sure things are done in the right order because just like in the home, if you tear out a wall, you could, just like in the body, you can release these toxins. And then if they're not getting properly taken out, then now you could even have a worse problem than you started with.
Yeah.
Or you can develop resistance to things, or there's a lot of ins and outs, which is why I'm so glad we have you to help on the medical side. And I think so many people have been burned bad by the remediators, the mold testers. So many people have been really burned and they've been scammed, I want to say, or sometimes I call it the fog you special, where they come in and they
oh,
fog your house and that
yeah.
costs you like 5 grand. I hope I could say that. I said FOG. But it's like we come in and take all your money and then you've been fogged. You haven't really been helped. But you have to, if you're listening at a certain point, you have to trust somebody. Unless you're going to give yourself all the knowledge, but then still you don't want to go rip out your walls yourself. You have to trust somebody, and it's hard when you've been burned, but listen to our content. Look at our resources that we have, which I think most of it, I'm looking at your site now, it looks amazing and it's free. Like, take the knowledge, not knowledge is power, and it's free most of the time. Um, and people really need to put their trust into someone. It's usually not a solo thing. It's teamwork makes the health dream work.
Yeah,
Love that.
totally.
Any, so we have a few minutes. Any of the questions that you guys have seen come in the comments that you wanted to address at this time?
Yeah, so someone asked, what is your opinion on whole house humidifiers? You know, I think as long as they have humidistats and they're kept clean, they're okay. I have clients that have full house humidifiers that live in drier climates. They need them. They have a lot of woodwork. If the humidity drops too low, it can damage the woodwork. And so they can be a necessity depending on where you live. Whole house dehumidifiers also, if you live in a tropical environment like me, or you need more dehumidification. I think those are good strategies too. But like any other automatic appliance you put in your house, they need to be maintained and clean regularly. Otherwise, they can grow mold as well. And so I think it's important to look at that. And when I say humidistat, you don't want something to just pump humidity into your house endlessly. You want it to shut off when it gets to a certain humidity level, right? And so obviously we all know that if it's too high and too humid, we have this ability for mold and bacteria to start to thrive and grow, right? Even dormant spores, right, will grow if the conditions are right. So it's really important that we don't add too much moisture to the environment, you know, inadvertently.
Yeah, I'm in Florida, and a lot of what I see, even in other states, is like very humid areas, and people are like, "Okay, thanks, I'm gonna go buy a humidifier." I'm like, "Stop, dehumidifier." Is usually better for mold because we want to keep the humidity low. That's one of the things I tell people. You can sometimes overkill with a dehumidifier is not good because then you could dry yourself out and your home out, and if you have woodwork, you never want to be too dry, but people definitely want to be below that 50%, or sometimes even a little lower, to really prevent mold. But make sure you guys know that a dehumidifier is pulling moisture out, a humidifier is adding moisture in, so there's got to be a balance. And I was just in an attic the other day, which is, it's nice when you see a dehumidified attic because you're like, oh, finally, like an attic that's probably not super moldy. But they had three humidistats, all were set to different settings. which I'm like, why not just do consistent 45? Why is 150, 160? And then they even had, get this, Michael, they had a drain pan in the dehumidifier, and instead of using like a metal support, they put wood in the drain pan. So there's moldy wood soaking up all the moisture from your dehumidifier, covered in mold in your attic. It's like there's got to be the person who's installing it is not necessarily the professional who should be assessing it and interpreting that it's done the right way. Um,
Yeah.
so just fun stuff all around. I don't
Yeah.
even see that question. It must have popped up when I was having technical difficulties.
Mm.
Um, and a lot, like I see a comment about, yeah, we're starting to fix some of this stuff, but I don't see it happening yet. Like, I don't think you should rely on the government as much as we try and change it. Like, this is a person to person thing where you've got to take action. You know, people say, well, I try to eat organic food. Well, how can you do that? It's so hard. Well, how can you eat McDonald's? How can you drink red food dye like you're not feeling well? It's much easier. Life is much easier when you just eat right, take care of your air, your body, your home. Like, people don't know what a clean home actually is, but it's like it's a magical place. Like, you go in and you're like, I could take a break from my day. A lot of people go home and they're in a more toxic situation than they were in all day. It's like, when do you ever get a second to rest?
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that, my ideology is just anything that you want to do in life, you have a baseline and you focus on improving that baseline. And it doesn't, nothing happens overnight. You know, if you want to lose 20 pounds, it's not just going to happen overnight. You're going to have to actually make some behavioral decisions. You're going to have to change some behavioral patterns, and you're going to have to make that a priority above some of the other things that cause you to gain the weight in the first place, right? You're going to have to, there's a mindset shift required. Air quality is no different. You're not, first you need to know what your baseline is before you can make an improvement. Otherwise, you're just making, you're blindly swinging a hammer. And then you have to, again, change your mindset and then make decisions. Maybe the first decision isn't, I'm going to, rip apart my house and remove any speck of mold that I find, right? Maybe this first thing that you're going to do is, let's improve the filter on my HVAC. Let's get a really good air purifier in the bedroom. You're going to take some steps, right? Um, Maybe you're like, hey, I want to, see what my dust looks like. I want to understand what's going on in there and get a baseline. I mean, you're going to kind of take steps, right? And so you don't have to dive in head first and just go to the max. Um, Most people, I mean, I've worked with some great celebrities. I can tell you that even they don't just go to the max from day one, right? They start to take some steps. They start to notice some benefits. They start to take more steps, right? And so it becomes a natural progression. I mean, anything else in life, you want to eat better quality food, good. What's your baseline? Is your baseline you're eating McDonald's every day? Or is your baseline like, well, I'm not really having much processed food, but I'm not shopping organic? Like, okay, good. Well, then figure out how do you improve that baseline. Just take a step. Um, I'm a human being too, guys. I get overwhelmed just like anybody else. I can get anxiety just like anybody else, right? And so when I look at it from this perspective of what do we need to do to make better decisions, well, we need to kind of figure out where we're at and be honest about that. And then say, like, well, what's it look like to make a next step? Let's stop focusing on being at the end of the journey. Let's start focusing on what's the next step that I could take. And when we start bringing it down that way, it's not so overwhelming. Like you could take a step. So take a step. And then you could then take another step and take another step. How do people climb Mount Everest? Right? One step at a time. That's how they do it. And so,
Yeah.
start your journey, start one step at a time.
Wonderful. I love that. I think that's a great place to tie it up for Mold Pod Live today. So, mold solutions for the home, for the body. And we appreciate you for being here, Michael. Thank you. And of course, Jonathan, always a pleasure. So, thanks, guys, for joining us. And we will see you on the next one, okay?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, TDD, for doing your thing. We appreciate you. Thanks, Michael.
Bye.